So Bungie did not want players exploring this massive crack in Halo 2. For whatever reason, they made it nearly impossible to access. So, can we penetrate this crack somehow?
Let's get me some!
So this ledge is located just outside of the first building on the mission, Gravemind. And the reason it is so inaccessible is because Bungie decided to slap death barriers everywhere. So while it might not look like there's a large drop, getting down to that ledge even from the playable area is an impossible task. So in order to be able to get to this ledge, I had just one idea. In order to get down there, we would need to get up there. The plan was to get all the way to the bottom of the map, the very bottom, and then somehow launch all the way up to this ledge. This was the only way that I could foresee getting around the death barriers. If you can't make it through them, go under them. But doing this was no small undertaking. I had a plan in my head, but this plan was a series of long, complicated steps. The first step in this process was setting up a rig so that we could eventually launch from the bottom of the map to this ledge. It wasn't enough to just get down there, we needed items to be able to launch all the way back up. But because there's only 2-player co-op in Halo 2, we would have to think about this. My first plan was to try to get a bunch of grenades to the bottom of the map by getting them stuck to a Covenant space crate. So I took one of these crates and I lined it up against a level surface. My plan was to use the Pinata Skull to beat plasma grenades out of my brother. With the Streaking Skull equipped, he could just throw grenades over and over again and regenerate all the way up to double overshields. So I'd be able to hit like 8 to 10 grenades out of him, and all he would have to do is throw grenades for like 30 seconds to get up to double overshields again. Rinse, repeat. Then the plan was to move every single one of these plasma grenades onto one of these Covenant space crates. Now I originally got this idea from SRL and Grumpy because in previous Halo 2 videos I've seen a setup where you transport plasma grenades on Covenant space crates, and for whatever reason it seems like they stick to them. Now I don't know if this feature was exclusive to Halo 2 or if there's some sort of special crate or method you have to use to get them on these crates, but the thought was if I could just get the plasma grenades on top of these crates, I assumed they would just stick there. After we spent 5 minutes moving 60 grenades just 3 feet, I sent my brother just around the doorway next to me to get a checkpoint.
Alright, am I good go on me, brother?
I had an idea. Instead of shooting all these plasma grenades on top of this crate, what if I just moved the entire stack with another plasma grenade? But because of the 15 minutes it took to set this all up, I wanted to make sure I had a checkpoint for multiple attempts. Me, Guan. Me Guan, take me Guan.
My gosh. I should have never said it. Go on, me brother. Go on.
Guan. Let's go on there.
Go there. Let's go there. Let's make noise.
After trying roughly 15 to 20 times to get this plasma grenade stack on top of this one singular Covenant space crate, I decided to move 3 crates all next to each other right by the plasma grenade stack. I figured this was more than enough surface area, and even if the grenades bounced off one of the crates, well, I expected them to stick onto another. Now fortunately there are plenty of checkpoints on this section of the mission, so I instructed my brother to go slightly forward and get another one. Now we needed this to work. If we couldn't get past the first step, we had no chance of getting to that ledge later.
Checkpoint.
So remember when I said there's plenty of checkpoints on this mission? Well, after I tried to launch this pile, it landed directly next to this pedestal. And then as I was going to revert to the last checkpoint, I got another checkpoint in between. This meant that the 30 minutes we had invested in this already was bunk. So we'd have to find a different way to do this, and that would mean resetting our entire trick. Because we had already used 3 checkpoints, we needed to make sure that we had enough checkpoints to be able to activate one when we get to the bottom of the map later to try to launch up. We need that one final checkpoint. And obviously my theory of plasma grenades sticking to the Covenant space crate did not seem to be correct. I didn't really know what I was doing and it didn't seem to be working. Then I had an idea. What if we stuck all of the grenades in the Covenant's grav lift platform? This had edges with railings that would prevent the grenades from slipping right out. Okay, I think that's enough.
There you go.
So my brother got a checkpoint, and honestly, we didn't end up really needing it. This worked perfectly. I had a brute shot to move this lift, and the explosion from the brute shot impacts wasn't blowing up my grenade pile. In fact, all of the plasma grenades were sticking exactly where they landed in the first place. So now I would just need to knock this off the edge into the bottom of the map, and then we'd be on to our next step, getting to the bottom of the map. Now the premise of doing this is very simple, and I did this about a month ago. I discovered a video from Grumpy that basically gave you the tutorial on how to do this, and now that I had done it previously, well, knowing how to do it was half the battle. I was able to set this up very quickly, but basically all you have to do is walk over the top section of the last gravity bridge. If you can get to the door, there should be 2 jetpack elites, and if you kill one of these, oftentimes the other one just freezes and you can push him around wherever you want. So if you push him over a couple of ledges, you can then stand on top of his head and eventually you'll fall all the way to the bottom of the map. But this took literal hours. Over half of the recording footage was just me falling to the bottom of the map with this. If you're looking back towards the beginning of the mission, if you go to the left side of the gravity bridge, eventually you'll hit a point where you start falling rapidly. But if you're on top of this elite and it starts drifting to the right of the gravity bridge, you only fall a couple inches per second. And the bottom of the map, well, it's like half a mile from the actual playable map. Now, eventually I did get down here, but now was the moment of truth. I needed to go find this gravity lift platform, and I needed to make sure the plasma grenades were still there. If they disappeared, I was screwed. Here it is. At long last. All the grenades are still in here. Nice. So now that we were down here with all the grenades on the gravity lift platform, it was time to get them onto the ground. I was going to set up a nice, neat pile separate of this lift. Now, initially I thought, well, there's a hole in the middle, so that's the only place that I could push these grenades. But after 3 minutes of barely any progress and no grenades pushed to the middle of the circle, I was like, there's gotta be a better way. And then randomly, I noticed some of the plasma grenades were underneath the platform, so I figured out that you could shoot the plasma grenades right through the edge of this lift. So instead of having to shoot all of these into the circle, I was just going to shoot all of them through the wall. But then, when I was doing this, I wasn't really sure how to get these through the wall. Some of them just popped through, and the ones that I was shooting at didn't seem to be penetrating it. Then I had a genius idea. What if I flipped over the grav lift and then shot the grenades? Would they just fall right to the ground? And surprisingly, exactly this happened.
Sam, would you like wind chimes by the hot dogs and the soothing sound of wind and meat?
Dude, this is sick. If you flip this thing over, the plasma, you can just shoot the plasmas right off of it. Like they're barnacles on a ship.
Cool, dude. Wish I could see it, but you canceled me. You kicked me out of the Cool Kids Club.
Now that I finally had my grenades separate of this lift, all I needed to do was converge all the piles into one unified grenade. Because the distance was so great, I would need a lot of power. And if I had to estimate, the grenade total I needed was anywhere from 30 to 40. Now, after about 5 minutes, I got all of these plasma grenades unified into one pile. In order to launch up there, what I was going to do was throw a plasma grenade behind this pile and then jump right on top of the pile as it was about to explode. Now, I had the Sputnik and Feather Skulls enabled for this, but not the Boom Skull. Because the Boom Skull has a 2x explosion radius, I needed to make sure I could actually jump on this pile without getting blown 5 million feet backwards. But anyways, I looked at the spot where I planned on throwing my plasma grenade behind this pile, and I was lined up roughly 100 feet outside of where I thought the line was to go up to that ledge. Now I just needed my brother to get a checkpoint and I was ready to pull this off. After about 10 minutes of failed attempts, I decided to switch this up and move myself to the other side of the plasma grenade pile. Before, when I was throwing the live plasma grenade, the stack was getting hit towards me, but I needed to go forward. And because there was a live plasma grenade exploding on the other side of the stack, that meant that I could only really go up and backwards if I threw the grenade while looking towards the tower. If I went to the opposite side, I could once again go up and backward. But then the tower would be behind me, so I would have a better trajectory and what I thought was a higher likelihood of making this. Boom! Easy! Wow. So dark up here. It's freaking huge. So from the bottom of the map or the playable area, this ledge doesn't seem that significant, but being here, it's really big. I mean, it took me 2 to 3 minutes to do a full loop around to the other side of this. And I always talk about this, but I love how Bungie, specifically in Halo 2, made these massive, grandiose structures, and then the majority of them which is not the playable map. If Halo Studios could ever get back to that recipe, I think they would be gold. If you can actually manage to get to the other side of this, the lighting is much better and there are no ledges obstructing your view. So you get a nice wide open view of all of High Charity and the structure. One of the few times I actually lined this up correctly. Oh, not here. Does this just lead up to the lift? Now, I wanted to see if I could go up the slanted slope, and I was met with a lot of resistance. However, I found out you could grenade jump up to an area where you could actually walk. It gets pretty slidey here, and there's not a ton to do. Oh, you can walk up this part. Why? Couldn't walk up before. Oh, if you start sliding down, you can't walk on it. I also tried grenading up to the upper ledge, you know, the section at the beginning of the mission, to see what it was like. I'm below the platform right now. That should have been deloaded. But with the tools I had on me, well, I just couldn't quite get the distance. Not even real. Just a crate sitting there in the game. Am I sliding? Crate floating up there. I'm venturing down the way. I couldn't get up that wall. Bro, he's like white.